Hi, I'm Yvonne Smith. I'm a certified hypnotherapist. I have been working with abductees. I call them abductees experiencers. I use both terms for the last 32 years. I also founded my support group 31 years ago, Close Encounter Resource Organization, for the purpose of uh, having people come together in a safe environment for those people who've had these experiences to speak freely and comfortably and not worried that they're going to be exposed or ridiculed. After when I first started my practice, no one to talk to. I started with about 5, 6 people and just put the idea out there and say, what do you think if we create, let's say, hold meetings once a month? That we started in my living room in my home, and we've been meeting ever since. And ever since we were all locked down on COVID in 2020, I started also, besides the in-person meetings, which we couldn't do because of the quarantine, I started hosting the Zoom meetings for people who, of course, obviously we couldn't get together because of COVID, but for people who belong to our group, I'm located in Southern California, but I have many people in all 50 states. So they have the opportunity to attend a Zoom support group meeting, which I just finished about 20 minutes ago. Uh, I have them every third Sunday of the month, and in-person meetings every fourth Sunday of the month. And during the week, I do consultations and regression sessions. And Deb, are you going to be asking me questions? I'm
Oh,
sorry.
yes, absolutely, of course. I was just letting you finish. So a lot of people told me about your work and said, Yvonne's been doing this a really long time. You should definitely talk to her. So I guess one of the things I would like to ask is um, about how many people do you think that you've engaged with have had experiences that they sought out assistance for?
Oh my gosh, probably over the last 32 years, probably I would say a couple of thousand people. Um, and that translates to hundreds of hours of regression therapy. I set aside 2 hours for each session, um, which gives me time to sit down and talk to them. Before we do the hypnosis, I take notes. They tell me where they want to start exploring, whether it's back to childhood because it's experience usually begins in early childhood and follows the person throughout their lives. Some people want to explore um, a recent experience, could be, last month or last year. Um, so I want to give my clients and myself plenty of time. So we sit down, do the interview, I take notes, I go into the regression, which can be 30 minutes to an hour, sometimes a little bit more. And then we do the debriefing afterwards. A lot of questions then, a lot of, did I make this up? Oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. And it's a very long and tedious process to do the regressions for this subject, for this experience.
And how does one become a certified regression or hypnotherapist?
Well, there are several schools, I believe, around the country. They're all very different. I chose a school here locally long, long time ago because it was an hour uh, of training and classes, and uh, some schools will offer weekend classes. I can't see how someone becomes certified in a weekend, but I learned, the mechanics of hypnosis, uh, first step, and then I went through all the different classes, psychology classes. Um, then in my, what do they call it? I forget what they got, class 3, step 3, to be able to get my certification. I worked in the clinic to gain my hours alongside a licensed therapist. So then I finally, when I was able to get all my hours, I became a certified hypnotherapist. And of course, now I understand they do Zoom classes like so many people do. People around the country would just have to research what schools or colleges of hypnotherapy are in their area, and make sure that they have a complete curriculum, and uh, they're credible. I would do some research on that. I was just very fortunate that I had one that was very close to my home, maybe 30-minute drive to and from. So I do training now for therapists, for licensed therapists who are practicing, of course, seeing clients, but they have expressed interest in asking me, how do I start working with abductees? And so I'm doing my third training in September, first part of September, where the requirements are for the therapist that they already have to be certified, because I'm not teaching hypnosis, the mechanics of hypnosis. I'm going to take them beyond, from where they were certified, and they're working with their patients to incorporate abductees, experiencers in their practice. So I'll be doing, I think I said, this will be my third workshop that I'll be teaching. Because over the years, I've received so many questions and so many uh, requests to teach classes, because there was so much interest in therapists that I had met at conferences where I was speaking.
Yes, that's one of the things that UAP Medical Coalition is working on, is trying to help therapists who may not be as familiar with the topic, to understand the best practices and treatment for experiencers. Do you have some suggestions and advice off the top that you can think of that you would give to someone who wants to understand the best way to help somebody?
Um, Through the coalition, they want to teach, or I mean, if therapists are interested that you know of, or all the members of the coalition know of, I mean, they're certainly welcome to sign up for my class, which is September 9th and 10th. But I'm teaching just as I learned in my training, not from hypnotherapy college. They, back in 1990, 1989, 1990, they, of course, didn't teach regression, and certainly not regression for abductees. Um, I was taught by Bud Hawkins, who was considered the pioneer of abduction research. He wrote many books, and um, he did over 40 years or more of his research until he passed away a few years ago. But the best way that I learned was to observe, sitting in on his sessions with the client's permission, and observe what he was doing, how he was asking questions, observe the person reacting and answering the questions. And of course, in regression, they do relive the experience. So the therapist has to be ready for the trauma to come forward, what to say, what suggestions to give them. I mean, I've had people wanting to jump off the couch because they felt they were there, on the ship, on the table, surrounded by these beings. So it's just a, it's a very, very delicate work because we are dealing with PTSD symptoms. And that's my first goal as a hypnotherapist is to relieve those symptoms. The research would be secondary, of course, because we all have to learn how to live in this world, live life. And this particular experience is lifelong. It starts in early childhood, follows the person throughout their lives. It's also intergenerational, so other members of the family would be affected, and on and on. I mean, I've worked with many, many families. So that's how I initially learned. So I'm teaching my my workshop, the people, by attendees, by having them observe an actual regression with some of my serial members who are uh, all have had abduction experiences. So they will be observing exactly what I do and exactly how the person reacts. It's an actual session, an actual regression, and I think is the best way for someone to learn. Um, I don't know. Of course, times have changed. We've gotten a little bit better. I don't know if any of these hypnotherapy colleges around the country teach the working, the regression and working with abductees. I tend to doubt it. But again, people need to research that. Um, but
Okay.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Deb.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, so how effective do you think hypnotherapy has been for easing some of the trauma for people who have had these experiences?
Oh my gosh, over all the years I've been working, um, they have told me that it's been extremely effective for them. Excuse me. That it has their sessions have relieved a lot of the PTSD symptoms. They're able to sleep. They're not so hyper vigilant. They're able to concentrate better. I mean, it doesn't happen overnight, of course, but just today in my Zoom support group meeting, a couple of the new people that came in that have joined my group have said, "Oh my gosh, I feel in just the one session, I feel so much relief that I'm amazed and I'm very pleased." And I love hearing that feedback because that's what keeps me going in my work. So even one session will relieve the symptoms, but the more that we work together, or they work with their therapist, um, they become conditioned to the feeling of hypnosis. They know they've, even though they'll relive the experience, bringing up the hidden memories in the subconscious to a conscious level and then dealing with each one has been very, very healing. Now, as we know, I'm sure you know, Deb, that the subconscious job is to protect us. Anytime we have uh, a traumatic experience, whatever it is, including abduction, it will block perhaps all of the experience or part of the experience. And eventually the subconscious will release, bits and pieces of the experience, no matter what it was. I've dealt with people who've had terrible car accidents and, sexually abused and things like that. But mostly, of course, I specialize in the abduction work. But that's where people will, they'll feel, oh my gosh, maybe, something happened the night we saw a bright light in the sky, or maybe something happened because we can't remember what happened in 2 hours of lost time. Um, so I feel it is an excellent tool to help someone uh, get on with their lives, incorporate this very uh, extremely difficult experience in their lives so that they could move on with their marriage, with their relationship, because it does affect relationships. Move on with their work. This cannot interfere with work because everybody needs to, we all have to pay bills, uh, no matter what. We have to pay our taxes. So that's my goal. And I feel in all the years I've been doing this, 3 decades, that, and I, that's why I continue doing it. I feel that I'm asked that question frequently. And I feel if I had not seen for myself the healing and the improvement and people telling me how it changed their lives, I don't know if I would be doing this for 32 years. But I know that I've helped a tremendous amount of people, and that's what keeps me going in this work. Uh, so I'm really happy and pleased that I could be part of this UAP Medical Coalition. I think it's a wonderful idea to put all this together.
Yeah, one of the things I was concerned about, and I'm glad you touched on this, is that some people have what is called screen memories, or they forget, they have almost like an amnesia, but then something kind of leaks out. So I've always wondered if it was perhaps better to leave the memory alone. So I'm glad you kind of touched on that a little bit.
Yeah. It depends on the person and the situation. I tell people if your life is going along and you're fine, you're not having nightmares or recurring dreams, you're able to sleep, you have wonderful friends and family, your work is going well, I tell them to leave it alone. I said it's not enough to just say, oh, I'm kind of curious and I want to see if I was abducted. Because if all that comes forward, if in fact it was an abduction experience or several abduction experiences, I use the analogy you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube once it's out, and it's going to change your life. The people that come to me are the ones who are having extreme PTSD. They're not able to concentrate on anything, and it is ruining their lives. Really, many marriages are broken up in relationships, and so those are the people that come to me, and those are the people that I will help. And because I'm a hypnotherapist, I've gone through years of traditional therapy, psychologist, psychiatrist, uh, marriage family counselors, and yet there's an area that still they're not able to tap into. And so I, over the years, have received uh, referrals from therapists saying, I know you do this work and I don't know what to do with it. And I think this person may have had something happen. So I know that, you know, those screen memories are not a cover up for sexual abuse, physical abuse or whatever it is, because I've dealt with all of that in their traditional therapy for many years. Um, so I take those people and interview them, of course, send them the questionnaires that I sent out. And if they're ready and if I feel that I'm able to help them, and if there's similarities that I see in their answers to their questionnaires and during the interview, then the next step would be to then schedule a session.
So it sounds like a lot of the people who have come to you may also be seeing a traditional therapist at the same time, but the therapist is feeling unable to adequately provide treatment.
Right, because well, many of the traditional therapists really don't want to work with this. It is, it's like we're going into the unknown. They don't want to really touch the subject. I can understand that. Um, so when they are working with their therapist they have for years, or a medical doctor, I always ask them to have their therapist or doctor write out a prescription for hypnosis, for hypnotherapy. And of course, usually the therapist will know it. It's a great stress release and uh, a great way for them to be able to relax. And so I've never ever had any of the therapists refuse, to have their patient come to me, because it does, as I mentioned before, I've seen a lot of improvement and healing.
Okay. And so they essentially, if they are reporting incidents of past sexual abuse, a therapist is also working with them on that. And the therapist is unable at this point, like that's one of the reasons we have UAP Medical Coalition, unable to proceed beyond that and to touch on this
Right.
area. Um, and I think that's a key point. We have a lot of people who probably have experiencers coming to their sessions and are not getting the
Yeah.
treatment that they need. Do you have any like quick advice for someone who has someone come in who may not be ready to reach out to a hypnotherapist, but has someone sitting on the couch, so to speak? What can they do for best treatment for that person?
I think the first thing, the real important thing is for there not to be any kind of uh, what am I trying to say? Oh gosh, I just lost the word. I'm sorry. I think after my hour and a half meeting, I'm kind of tired, but for them to, for the therapist to listen with an open mind, not to be critical, and not to be oh, closed-minded, because this is a very, very real physical experience, and it affects all aspects of the person's life. I've had people come to me and say, "Oh my gosh, I mentioned this to my therapist, and then I could tell he or she didn't believe me." And I'm afraid, and most of the ones that tell me they're afraid that they're going to be put into a mental hospital. They're so afraid that the therapist might recommend them at a 72-hour hold. Um, so we need to, I'm glad we're doing this because we really need to bring traditional therapists and medical personnel to really grasp and understand that this is real. As I mentioned before, this is real. These people are not making this up. Uh, they would suffer more in their lives. They would have no reason and they would gain nothing for making this up. Um, and just to listen, sit and listen. And I think that's, because people will go to their therapist. Like many have come to me and say, "Oh my God, you're the very first person I ever told this to," because I was so afraid people were going to think I'm crazy. Uh, and so that therapist may be the very first person that patient is talking to about this. So they need to show compassion, and they need to show that the person's not alone, that they are listening to them, even though they're not trained to work with this. They can assist and be helpful with relieving the PTSD symptoms that these people have. Uh, so that's, I think we need to bring in all these therapists and traditional therapists who've maybe not sure, they've heard about this, but maybe not sure. But the ones that contact me and are signing up for my workshop are the ones that they have a license. They've been practicing for many years, but they're very interested in incorporating the abduction cases in many times because they've had experiences or their family members have. It is more widespread than I think the general public realizes. If they realize that this is happening to millions of people, I don't know what their reaction would be, but that's how widespread it is. I mean, it could be your next door neighbor, your coworker, your family member. This is what I've discovered in my 32 years.
Yes, one thing that doesn't get covered very much is that it's also very much an international issue that does
Oh,
not just happen in the United States,
no,
that these in
no. I would really worry, Deb, if it was just happening here. you know, uh, but no, I've lectured in other countries, and people have uh, something in my lecture presentation and my slide presentation uh, they related to, even though they didn't speak my language. I had to have an interpreter to communicate. And just in my meeting today, in my Zoom meeting, one of our members moved back to Germany, where she's from. So she was on the Zoom meeting. I have Ciro, a group, my group that is Cyril France. They asked if they could name it Cyril France 10 years ago. So here we have a satellite group in France that they're working, their therapists working with abductees there. So it is worldwide. It's anywhere, and the experiences are all very similar as they are here.
Okay, so I'm going to switch to talking about the medical doctors for a moment because I imagine that's come up in a few of your support groups. What are people reporting related to medical issues in a, you don't have to talk about anyone specifically, obviously, but just general way that doctors should be aware of?
When people have had abduction experiences, they often will have, excuse me, I'm sorry, I have sinus problems. They usually will have sinus problems. They'll have nosebleeds, um, and that is very common in childhood, but many times in adulthood, people will have nosebleeds, sudden nosebleeds. They will have hearing a very distinct, very high pitched tone in one ear. Uh, they will have pain in certain parts of their body. They'll feel something that's perhaps right under their skin, which we feel, all through the years, we realized that people were being implanted with some kind of object. We don't know exactly what it's for, but one of our theories, it's been a tracking device like we do with our wildlife. So I tell people, and I've had many, I just say, um, it's best to doctor and rule out anything medical. Rule out, you don't want to just say, oh, this is because I was abducted. I always want to make sure that they're not suffering from headaches because there might be a tumor there. Um, I have them ask for x-rays if they see some type of object protruding in any part of their body where it's right under their skin and they could feel it. Sometimes it irritates or it might be painful, other times it's not. But I tell everyone that I'm working with that we need to rule out anything medical, and then we go through the sessions, and many times we find out that they were implanted in one ear, they're implanted in the back of their scalp. There's a lot of head procedures that happen. So years ago we assumed, okay, they're implanting people, which they have objects right near the brain, which cannot really be removed. Um, but it depends on the relationship the person has with their doctor. If they've been with that doctor all of their lives, since they were children. It's a family doctor. Many of my clients have said they have been honest and said, doctor, I think I've had abduction experiences and this or that hurts, or I feel pain here or there, and can you check it out? Uh, a lot of ear, like I said, a lot of ear and head procedures go on. The majority of people aren't going to be that upfront with their doctor. So I just tell them, just let them know you have pain or discomfort in a certain area, and if you could get an X-ray or an MRI and see if anything shows up. So it's difficult. It's difficult because they don't know how their doctor is going to react. And again, a lot of them are very afraid that they're going to be uh, admitted into a mental facility. So all of that takes time, and I've been hoping for many years that we can get more medical personnel in. I mean, medical personnel, including doctors, have been abducted too. So it happens to anyone at any time.
I have noticed that because of the work of Dr. Gary Nolan, perhaps there have been a lot of neurologists that have been interested, but it would be great if other doctors, especially ones that have to do with immunology or
Yes.
some of the other aspects of the body, gynecology, were interested, dermatology. A lot of
Oh,
people are, yeah, a lot of people have said that they end up with skin lesions, little marks on their skin, triangle
oh,
shapes. Um,
oh, yeah.
and if those things are happening, it would be great if some of these doctors were aware of the possibility that something else might be going on so that they could better assess their patients.
It would be great because when I was working with Bud Hawkins and John Mack, many years ago when I was starting, um, we didn't realize at first that when people came up with marks that came up overnight, and I have several pictures of triangular shaped bruises and needle marks and so forth. At first, we didn't realize there could be an object right underneath that mark. Not always, but there could be. And so it would be a lot easier if people can go to their doctor, like you say, look what happened. I didn't have this when I went to bed, but it is here now. And, can we get this examined? Can I get an x-ray? That would be wonderful. I hope I could see that in my lifetime.
Yeah, I've noticed doctors have gotten into this trend of saying, only tell me about one or two issues. Like they don't want to hear the litany of issues. And I think that when you don't hear all of the
Yeah,
symptoms together, you're going to miss the big picture, unfortunately. So
exactly.
do any of your clients talk about having a positive experience with medical treatment after having been brave enough to tell the doctor about this?
There have been a couple of excuse me, I'm sorry. There's been a couple of my clients that have said that they were very, very pleased that their doctor was very open minded and they could talk to them, and they were able to get examined or whatever it was. It was just, it's like a handful of people. But I'm very pleased that people are starting to say, abductees, I've had this experience and I'm just going to tell my doctor or whatever, or my therapist, because I'm not lying and I'm not crazy, and they're tired of living that double life.
Okay. So, about these implants, I wanted to specify a concern that I've heard a few times. that some people, when they've had them removed, have said that the object that was removed disappears, as in the people who have taken it out misplace it quite often.
Mhm.
Have you heard of that happening to people?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I've heard of. I think a long time ago there was an object that was. Of course, I don't think I'd ever do this. Overnighted to a lab, and it got lost. It was never found. So with my clients, I said, if we're going to send this out, oh, I think we're having an earthquake, Deb. I'm
Oh
in
my
Southern.
gosh.
I just I'm in Southern California. We're having an earthquake.
Oh
Oh my
no.
god! And we're having a storm at the same time. I don't know. Where are
Hmm.
you, Deb? Where do you live?
I'm on the East Coast.
Well, we've had this very unusual, well, hurricane coming in from Mexico, Baja, and it came up our coast. We've been hit with rain since 6:30 this morning, but it is a historical storm watch for Southern California. We've never had it before. Um, Everything's closed. All of our parks, like Disneyland, Knott's Berry Farm, they're all closed. All the beaches are closed because we're supposed to get rain. I mean, it has not stopped raining today. We're supposed to get a year's worth of rain in one day or a day and a half. They're
Wow.
worried about flash floods and in the desert area. So I'm so sorry. I just sat here and I'm like, I know I'm not shaking this table, and then I realized it's an earthquake. Um, oh my God! So we're having the storm and we're having an earthquake. Oh my goodness. Um,
I'm glad
okay,
it was a
so
smaller one. Thank God.
yeah, I think it was like 4 on the Richter scale. I could kind of tell it shook a while. Oh, okay. Talk about PTSD, right?
Yes.
When you've been through this before. Um, that's yeah. I'm trying to see. I worked with. I don't know if you know or anybody talked about Dr. Roger Lear, where
Yes.
he was a surgeon, but he's a podiatrist, so he can only work on the feet. But he worked with a partner of his. And I forget the name. I always pronounce it wrong, but the other doctor could remove from other parts of the body. He had about, I think, 19, he did 19 surgeries with 19 implants. And I don't think any of those disappeared, thankfully. But I do know that when the object is still in the body, and say a doctor approaches it or somebody approaches it, it'll move. It'll move away from that person. It sounds very strange and very science fiction, but it's happened. I've seen it happen. But the way things are, I mean, I would not. If one of my clients, I have a case of a double abduction of brothers, and the one brother had it removed, had his removed in the late 80s. It wasn't from Dr. Lear, it was from another doctor. And for it to be analyzed further, they would have to completely destroy it so they can really analyze it. But he's not ready to do that. But I told him, I said, if we're going to do that, we're not going to mail it. We're going to take it. We're going to fly wherever we have to or drive where we have to and walk it in with us, not trust the mail or overnight or anything like that.
It seems like a good idea to keep your eyeballs on it at all times, right? Until
I
it's
I think so. Yeah. Um,
right.
but you know what? For the last few years, I have when people say, "Do you think I should have this removed?" I don't recommend people having the objects removed unless it is causing pain discomfort. And my client Jesse, it was causing a lot of discomfort. It was on the front part of his shin, where if you put the socks over it, because it's right under the skin, it would irritate. And so in that sense, he had it removed. But when people have had implants removed, and I knew a couple people, and I wrote about it in my book Coronado, they will have another abduction experience, and that one will be not so pleasant. The beings are looking for the object because they kind of know that they probably had it removed and they were looking for it. They're upset by it. So what happens is that the beings will reimplant the person, and in an area, say near the brain or the brain stem, where would be very difficult and dangerous to try to remove. I certainly wouldn't volunteer to have mine removed in those areas. So the thing is, in the long run, and I discussed this with Dr. Lear many times, that we don't know on the line if these implants are going to cause any permanent, medical problems. Does it cause cancer? Does it cause, any other? Does it cause ALS? In other words, we don't know um, the end game per se to having these implants in the body. We still don't know, and I don't know if we'd ever find out. But because of the experiences my clients had with removing it, like I say, I don't recommend it unless it's causing discomfort or pain. Um,
Okay.
and I've been, I've been kind of holding to that for a few years now.
Have you ever heard of a child having an implant?
um, well, yes. As I mentioned, we had a double abduction of two brothers, Jesse and John. They both were implanted when they were 4 and 5 years old.
Okay.
And most children are implanted because, well, not, I won't say most, but it'll happen as a child because that's when the experience begins in early childhood.
Okay. And are there other indicators? I mean, obviously, most people may not know if their child has an implant, but are there indicators for children that we should be aware of?
Some of the indicators are the heavy nosebleeds. Uh, could be an indication because one of the very, very typical procedures is to have a long instrument inserted in the nasal cavity, one, either the right or the left, deep within the nasal cavity. And there's an implant, maybe a round BB-like object at the end of that long instrument that is placed there deep within the sinus cavity. And that's why a lot of people have sinus problems and nosebleeds. I mean, my own young son had terrible nosebleeds when he was about 5 years old. And then I thought, oh my God. Um, I never found anything, in his, within all, my husband and I would look through the blood. And I said, if you feel anything hard, don't throw it away. We never did find anything, but that's one of the big indicators. Of course, if there's blood in the ears, but again, you want to take that child and we took him to the doctor and to see if there's anything, why he's having the nosebleeds, or say if a child's having bleeding from the ears, you want to take him in to a specialist to make sure there's nothing wrong, other than he was abducted and implanted, but you want to rule other things out first.
Have you ever found anything that indicates sleepwalking might be an indicator for people to to say maybe they're perhaps experiencers?
People have told me that when they were a child that they would sleepwalk, but I wouldn't say that it's so common that say, oh well, all sleepwalkers are abductees. But people have told me that they remember their parents telling them, "Oh, you were walking around, but I don't think you were awake." But people also have found themselves, or their parents have found them outside in the middle of the night. I was just speaking at a conference not too long ago, and I spoke to a couple of people, and before they were even able to walk, this one lady, she was in her crib. She was in her crib. She told me that her parents came in. They couldn't find her. She was not in her crib anymore. They looked all around the house, and they went outside, and the child was in the backyard. In the backyard is a wooded area with a stream behind it. The child was there by itself. How did it get out of the crib? It was impossible, and that's other stories. I have other cases of that. So are these people, some of these people, sleepwalking, or are they just been taken from their rooms, and placed in another area or placed outside? That's been very common.
Yeah, and one of the other misconceptions that we find is that people just assume a lot of these abductions are happening from the bed, but other people have told us that, I was, walking and then suddenly I was gone, or I was driving and then I was gone. Do you see that people are not necessarily asleep or in bed when
Oh,
these are happening?
oh, absolutely. I have cases of people either by themselves or with family members in a car. They're awake, they're driving, they're talking. They see maybe a light in the sky, like, oh my God, what is that? And, you know, they talk about it, and then they think, they continue on. They get home, and it's an hour or more later than it should be. Another indication, and I cover this in some of my lectures, that people are driving, they're looking ahead, and they see these blinking lights, and they're going, "Oh my God, I think there's an accident up there," and they see, like they would describe first responders with these blinking lights. They go through it. They go through the quote unquote accident scene, and again, they arrive home 2 or 3 hours late. Sometimes they don't notice it right away. Sometimes they do, but that part of it, that missing time, those hours that they cannot remember, and to them it's like, we just kept driving. It wasn't like they remember stopping and then starting again. It's seamless time, where that's what disturbing, because they feel like they were just driving. They continued driving as they passed the accident scene. So that's, oh my gosh, that's very, very common. So for the debunkers that say, oh well, that's all, they were dreaming, that's sleep paralysis. Well, I tell them, well, how about when they're not sleeping? What then? And they have other witnesses in the car with them. So, oh yeah, that's very, very typical, very common.
Yeah, there's actually quite a few cases that involve other witnesses.
Yes,
The one that comes to mind first is the very famous Travis Walton case,
right.
but there are many others.
Oh, many, many
Um,
others. Yes.
s- so I was going to ask if you had some final words that you would want doctors and therapists to hear, that you think are important for them to hear, if you could mention those.
Just for the doctors and licensed therapists out there, when someone tells you that,
I think your mic got muffled a moment.
wonder,
Yeah.
Okay. Um, for the doctors and therapists, if someone tells you, your patient tells you, whether you've known the patient for long or not, that they think they've had a UFO experience, they think they may have been taken, you know, try to take it seriously and listen to the person, because there's a whole history there of why this person was taken. It's a family affair, I called it. It's intergenerational, so it's not going to just be that person. It's going to be their parents or grandparents, and then on the other end, it's their children and their children's children. It's a very, even though it may be very difficult to believe at first, but it's this experience is very real, and it happens to people from all walks of life, like I have in my clientele. And it doesn't matter whether they're famous, not famous, rich, poor, uh, ethnic background. There is no discrimination when it comes to the being that as time goes on, and we've got these many witnesses stepping forward to talk about what they've seen up there, say the Navy pilots or commercial pilots who are very well trained, but they're have these experiences of things flying around them that aren't supposed to be in our airspace. More and more of that is coming out. More witnesses are going to come forward. So I think this is going to be hopefully part of the mainstream conversation. And if we can get people like you, doctors and therapists, to just listen to these people and work with us, uh, say we do have disclosure in our lifetime. Okay, yeah, we have crash craft, and we do have, non-human bodies. We're going to have a lot of people out there panicking, because many people don't look up in the sky and they don't think out of their box, but rather than, go to work, come home, watch a football game, and there's a lot more to this life. So we're going to have people out there that are going to need help. People like me do it all by myself. So I hope you will join us, and would love to meet some of you, because, like I said, I've been doing this for a very long time, and I'll do it until I can't do it anymore.
Okay, well, thank you so much for coming and giving me so much of your time today. I probably have a billion more questions, but I have to be
Sure.
respectful of your time. Please let people
Anytime,
know.
Deb.
Yes, I mean, I could ask you about all kinds of other things, but I think the last question I'll have for you is just, can you let people know how they can find you?
Oh, you can go to my website, excuse me, hypnotherapist YvonneSmith.com. It has all my background and questionnaires on there and so forth. I'm on Facebook, just so that people don't how to get in touch with me. Just put, I guess you could put in just Yvonne Smith hypnotherapist or Yvonne Smith UFO, and I'm on LinkedIn. Um, I'm not active on those, but you could find me there. So, and Deb, if anyone has any questions or you have any more questions, I mean, send me an email or whatever. I'm real happy to answer whatever.
Okay, thank you again so much. I hope people who need assistance will be able to go look at your group. It is on our list of UFO or UAP experiencer support, which is on the UFO connector. So if anyone's trying
Okay.
to consider which way they want to go, that's one of the options. And then I hope that doctors and therapists who have questions are willing to reach out and ask those questions. Thank you again so much for giving me so much of your time today. And I hope that everything's okay considering the storm and the earthquake that we went through in the middle of this interview.
And sorry for that interruption, but all of a sudden, we haven't had one in a while, and all of a sudden I knew I wasn't shaking my table, and then it just kept shaking. So I'm so sorry about that, but I
That's
just had a,
okay. It's one of those
but
things we can't control.
no, we can't. Um, it's funny, we were talking about UFOs and that happened. So,
Right.
um, okay, Jeb, well, thank you so much for having me, and email me anytime with any other questions.
Okay. And to everyone listening today, thank you so much for listening and take care.